Whoever you are, go out into the evening, leaving your room, of which you know each bit. Your house is the last before the infinite, whoever you are. Initiation by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is in page 384 of The House of Leaves. House of Leaves came onto my radar when in 2023 I watched a video on YouTube called MyHouse.WAD, inside Doom's most terrifying mod by Powerpack. It is an entire film that is sitting on this website, covering depth into a mod that is very simple on the surface, yet houses a rabbit hole of works that creates an impressive recreation, homage, and expansion to what has now become one of my more favorite works that I have ever read. Powerpack did a wonderful job on covering the My House mod, as well as Veg for being the spearhead for creating an amazing mod that captures the spirit of the house inside of the House of Leaves. So I do recommend that you watch the video or play the mod if you find interest in it, but my main curiosity came to revolve around the inspiration that created all of this media in the first place, and even a deeper curiosity on the writer himself, and how he came to create a piece of literature that has made my head spin more than all the last books that I have read.
Like this little cat who's eyeing who or what to pounce on soon. There is a lot invested in our anticipations.
If anyone is to ever show you this book, as I had definitely done when showing my family and friends, I take the book, I flip through it, I show them the odd structure, and I say, this book is an experimental novel. Look at how weird this is. The best example that you can see showcased online is the main labyrinth part of the book, where the text begins to bend, wrap around a blue box with footnotes spanning nearly infinitely down the pages that link to multiple different other footnotes to represent the house expanding into a labyrinth. It is a trip and cognitively quite draining to read, which in response you will hear, that is the point of this book. I am one of these people who say that, and I love it, which is why I'm making this video. I really love art that challenges me and that forces me into a position where I need to consciously consume it if I'm to understand it more. The writer of this book firmly believes font and presentation to be an integral role in how the story is understood, and with symbolism in the form of structure, can convey more immersion into the story.
So House of Leaves was a way of imagining textually as well as on a narrative level what that house was doing. So I could actually emulate the shifts of the house by shifting text, etc., etc.
Every instance of the house is highlighted in blue. The Minotaur with anything potentially referencing him is stricken out with red in the book. And each character has their own font to represent who is given their piece inside of the novel. I had to flip it, squint and move closer, and flip between the pages, even so far as to sit back agape with horror, with the realization that this house is infinitely massive. House of Leaves was written by Mark Z Danielewski in the span of 10 years. It is a big span of time, belief, and investment into a piece that I cannot leave unspoken in this video, nor fathom all too much, to be completely honest with you. It is a story of multiple narratives layered on top of each other. A manuscript recovered from being lost to time and obscurity that went through the hands of a tattoo artist, the internet, and then published into our hands. The manuscript in the story was also written by a man who early on we learn is blind, and had passed away before he was fully able to complete the manuscript. This said manuscript is a film review of a collection of film that a small nuclear family, the Navidsons, had put together and released throughout the 90s. The film consists of the Navidsons moving into a home in Virginia. When explored and examined, reveals that the interior of the home is bigger on the inside than on the outside. The depth that Zampano, the blind old man that wrote the manuscript, goes to explain events and the interpretations of the events that happens in the story is immensely expansive when you begin to peel back the layers of the narrative and look into the book. When Johnny, the tattoo artist, recovers the manuscript once Zampano has passed away, he begins to piece together the unfinished work. While he does this, he attempts to verify the people credited in reference to the events inside Zampano's work, to no avail. There is no evidence of the Navidsons or this film existing. That's what creates the madness of this book. Both Zampano and Johnny, two of the main narrators in the book, are unreliable in what comes to giving us the reality of the actual main story. They're flawed humans, on the brink of giving into some madness and going into the loony bin a little bit. Here's the basis of what Zampano retells in his review of the film. The house has a closet, a bookshelf, and a blank, dark hallway that appears in the house before the main events begin to happen inside of said hallway. We unearth a house that is unending. The house expands, shrinks, shifts, flips, and defies the laws of physics once a hired crew and Navidson himself begin to explore that blank, dark hallway. The explorers lose their mind. One named Holloway turns on the first expedition team and kills one of his crewmates and eventually himself. The house has this effect in this story. To my interpretation, the house itself reflects what is going on in the person's psyche inside of the narrative. A big chunk of this book is spent around a staircase that Holloway's team try to reach the end of, but because they're unsure if it'll ever end, it takes them nearly a whole week to traverse to the bottom of the stairs. When Davidson actually goes to rescue this team from becoming lost to being engulfed by the house, it only takes him 5 minutes to get to the bottom of those same stairs because Davidson knew there was an ending to them. But I don't necessarily want to sit here and try to give you an entire outline of the story. I hope you get the general idea. My goal is to have your curiosity piqued and you check out the book for yourself. There's details I'm missing, and I will be here explaining this for a really long time if I'm to try to actually explain everything. The work speaks for itself. I want to move on to talk about the writer. He's just as interesting to me as the narrative itself. In learning about Danielewski, I learned that Johnny was kind of a self-insert in some form. Not entirely, of course. I found that Danielewski has a lot better of a health and lifestyle than that of Johnny's.
But you know what? It was 6 days a week, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, working out, meditating, eating a good breakfast, and writing for 10 hours. And relationships, 2 very serious, burned to the ground around me, and a lot of stuff. So I don't really think it's a very healthy way to go about living, but it had to be written. It's a lot like, I think, climbing Everest without oxygen, pay a price. I'm very proud of it. It's my house, I suppose.
But in the story, Johnny has a strained relationship with his parents where he harbors a lot of trauma from. Johnny's mother clung to his father, and once they became separated, it sent Johnny's mother into a psychotic disarray that she couldn't recover from.
At the time of the divorce, which was in '84, she suffered a great deal, and I did not talk to my mother for probably 4 or 5 years after the divorce, nor did my sister. She, in essence, had a nervous breakdown.
Johnny's father dies in a trucking crash, which leads child Johnny to grow up in foster cares that are abusive and dismissive. In the same turn, Danielewski had a similar thing happen with his parents while growing up. Danielewski talks in an interview how his mother stood in his father's shadow, clung to his side, and in a way lived through his father. Though I'm not unsure that she became psychotic in the same turn how Johnny's mother had in the book, Danielewski's father also had not died in the same way. Rather, Tad Danielewski had passed from old age in hospital. Danielewski had explained his strained relationship with his father as someone who he both loved and feared deeply. I believe that I am pulled to Mark's writing because of the heart that he writes with, as well as the dedication to the craft. I also feel that deep sense of love for my father, and the deep fear that Mark also experiences. Mark had finished college, was in New York, when he found out that his dad was in the hospital across the country, in California. As a broke, freshly graduated writer, he began writing a manuscript for a book titled Redwood, that he wrote to process his strained relationship with his dad, and to present the manuscript to him when he got there. When Mr. Z here presented the manuscript to his father responded to Mark proposing that he get a job working in the post office. As a creative, this is a proposition of a literal death sentence. As I quote from Mark himself, I responded by reducing the manuscript to confetti, going so far as to throw myself a pity parade in a nearby dumpster. My sister responded by returning later to that dumpster, rescuing the confetti, and taping it all back together. So in contrast to digging up Mark's personal life that has been put out there, I'm also going to dig up more of his personal life in hopes that it sheds some light on the relationship with his sister in order to contrast the shadow that has been cast from his parents. From the quote just mentioned, Mark's sister, Poe, rescued the manuscript from a dumpster and in the span of 2 weeks, taped back together Redwood and gave it back to Mark. To me, this is a gesture of pure love and belief in her brother, which if Poe had not done something like this, we would not have received A House of Leaves, the Whalestone Letters, Only Revolutions, the 50-Year Sword, the Familiar series, the Little Blue Kite, and from following Danielewski's YouTube channel, there's definitely more to come. I want to also express a genuine thank you to Poe for caring about her brother, not just for the books either, but for just doing such a kind, loving thing for an amazing person who I can see sees so much heart through their writing. There even is a quote from Poe in The House of Leaves at the beginning of chapter 20, found titled The Return, which goes, "No one should brave the underworld alone." This is taken from a song called Hello, which was made by Poe, with assistance from our esteemed author here, in production on the video for the song. Poe is a singer and songwriter from the 90s, has had multiple songs hit the charts, and had produced an album called Haunted that had a dual release with House of Leaves, where it seems the more I read on, and from listening to Haunted myself, has pointed to both projects being a semi-collaborative effort from both Poe and Mark, with Haunted being Poe's focus, referencing House of Leaves, and Mark being inspired by the music she was making, even helping her write music. Both projects stand alone, yet tell an incomplete story of the other. If you listen to Haunted, there are sections where Mark Z reads from House of Leaves to give framing to the themes of the album, to install what it truly means to be haunted in our heads through some frightening interludes and some tasty jams. Is it possible to separate the art from the artist? In the case of Mark Z Danielewski, I'm not so sure. In the case of most writers, I'm also unsure. From my interpretation, House of Leaves is an attempt to explore the depths and labyrinths of our own psyche, which the book makes very clear that the house is a more psychological exploration of our characters and ourselves, more than the exploration of the house itself. In the final exploration of the house, Navidson, after being separated from his wife Karen and his children Daisy and Chad, returns to the house to go on a final exploration to find the truth in the depth of the 5.5-minute hallway to put the riddle of the house to rest. Subconsciously, a desire to destroy the self is emerging and pushing Navidson to do a final exploration, cued in from the letter he leaves Karen before he takes a hoard of supplies and an unnamed book. Your interpretation of this part of the story is highly personal and subjective due to the indulations of both House of Leaves' graphical presentation as well as the sparse words and unexplained physics of what happens. He goes on upside-down staircases, loses his supplies, yet clings to a box of matches, a flashlight, and said book he has carried with him. In the final moments of the Navidson record, Will Navidson is submerged and floating in darkness. He loses his flashlight and uses the match he has carried to read the book that he has brought with him up until this point. He ends up reading the book that you are currently holding, the House of Leaves. On his final attempt, he begins to burn the book and attempts to read an additional couple of pages before it scorches his hands, burns up, and he falls into the abyss. He falls for what seems like infinity, until we are interrupted by the tape ending. Karen realizes that putting together film that Navidson had got from the house, that she loves him. She sees between the gaps of him doing his work how much love that he holds for her and his children. She sees his love for her and his kids, and the amount of care he placed that she refused to see when Karen was absorbed by the fear that she held for the house. She returns to the house, and it appears as a normal home for a month, before she has a bleak opportunity to re-enter that dark hallway that appears from behind her. Fueled by pure love for her husband and faith that she will find him, she pushes past her fear that has controlled her for the entirety of the 700-ish pages of the book, taking steps into the darkness that she is unable to see in. She finds Navidson laying on the ground near death, a short distance walking in. Navidson had traveled over 400 miles in the house, and the faith and love had shortened that physical distance to a measly length of a normal room inside of that house. I believe that Poe's faith and love for Mark is represented in the sequence of the main narrative in the House of Leaves. I believe that it is what has been revealed to him when he was also writing this book. Karen's faith and love for her husband is what ended up saving him from going into a spiraling cycle of self-destruction. It is the same faith and love that saved Mark Z from cracking from his pity party in the nearby dumpster, where his confetti of redwood had both sat and been rescued from. So I think sometimes fiction might be more in alignment with reality, even holding congruency with reality than we sometimes give it credit. And it begs the question, how does your house look from the inside?
Writing is something that's innate in me. It's a desire to put pieces together that are outside of me. And it's a way of exploring the dimensions of this world. In some ways, the way a mathematician can reach the end of the universe without traveling there, using the language of numbers. There's a way to reach the ends of the heart and the soul by using words.